Hey everyone, welcome back. And here we have an LS 400 stock suspension. Can only mean one thing: putting on air ride. So what we have here: front, rear airlift performance, single Viar compressor for the time being, standard 4-gallon tank, 3P management system, 3/8 airlines, and then obviously everything else needed for the install, which would be your wiring harness, braided lines, fittings, fuses, relays, cutters. We have the 3/8 airline bundle, water trap, and everything else in between. So what I'm gonna do is talk about what we're doing for this trunk setup. It's gonna be a little different than previous Celsior that we did an install on. Then we'll take a look at how all the wiring is gonna be ran through from the back of the car, interior, chasing to the battery in the front, obviously on this driver's side, ignition connection, and then once that's all tied in, we'll take a look at the removal of the front suspension install, rears, how the lines will be ran, kind of patch everything back up on the inside, and then we'll get a look at what we're going to do for the trunk setup as well. Quick mock-up for this. Want everything kind of low profile and tucked underneath. That way we still have, granted, this land yacht, a lot of trunk space to begin with, but with the tank pressed against the back, still have all this room for groceries, storage, whatever it may be. So we'll dive into this a little later of what I'm going to be kind of putting together for a lower mount for the manifold, compressor, and everything. So again, just like the other videos, just how I'm doing the installs for the trunk setups and everything else to help answer questions or kind of give ideas with this. But I'm gonna go ahead and tear into I would say the wiring and kind of show the tools needed, what needs to be removed, and kind of how things can be ran to make it easier for you on your install. So to go through this video, as always, if you have questions, any issues you run into, if I don't address in this video, I'll go ahead and do a follow-up video of anything that might be needed. So give me a moment here. I'll start pulling all the panels apart, walk through, and we'll take a look at that. All right, got a lot of stuff situated, and what we're gonna take a look into is the rear over here. Get a little bit of light on this. So did remove the rear seat in full, the bottom, the back. Something to keep note of is to remove this whole back panel, you're gonna have a bolt right here. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 total. These are gonna be a size 12. So once you remove all these with the socket, I'd suggest an extension as well. It's gonna allow you to go ahead and lift this whole seat upwards, as there's like a circular metal bracket that holds it in right here. So once you remove this middle one out, bring the whole seat up and out, it's gonna give you access to everything right here that we need to be able to get from the bottom behind this cover back into here, where we're gonna run the lines from the manifold. So it'll be our power, our ground, and our ignition. So from back here through where the back seat is, we're gonna chase it down. And what I did is, some of the other videos, same thing. We have that little beauty cover that goes right here for the footwell. Lift straight up. You can see where these kind of clip in. Once that's removed, we're gonna chase our wires through here with the factory one, up underneath this as well. Same thing through the front, through here, lift this panel straight up, go and clip from these 4 spots. And then from behind the carpet right here on upwards, we see the harness that goes back behind to the fender, and I'll show that in a sec. Do keep note right here, driver's side, this little let me set that light right there, this little cover. We got this like clear plastic. Once this is removed, that's gonna be, we're gonna have access for the ignition connection as well. And you can see some of these are identified as front right fog, heater, wipers, gauge, and so on. We'll take a look at that when it's time to get the ignition wire tapped in with the appropriate fuse connectors and all that stuff. So we'll dial into this in a moment. But like I said, that wiring is gonna chase right through here to the right hand side. How it goes through the firewall, through that hole, which takes us into the engine bay. And then we have room to go to our power and ground on the battery. So should have, from what I recall with the cells here, we should have just enough slack with the factory harness with no modifications needed to get this from the trunk, again, through the back seat, down underneath, fender, up, engine bay, and then our connections right here. So what I'm gonna do is set this free, cut the zip ties off, and start stringing that from the back through the front with that kind of like circular shaped cover for the time being. I'm at least gonna go ahead and set my manifold where I'm gonna want that installed. Primarily, I would say on this side, it's gonna give that a little bit more slack than down here. And that way I can feed the lines and know where I need to have extra slack. The last thing I wanna do is have too much. If that is the case up towards the front, then I'm having to try to bundle it and stuff it anywhere. I don't wanna do that. I'd rather have it nice and neat to where it's the power, the ground, just enough to where I can kind of snake it through under some of this stuff. So when you lift the hood, you're not seeing wire just slapped over here across. Doesn't look great. So I'll kind of run that through, check back, see how it looks. Any excess that I do have, I'll show, and kind of coil it up or zip tie it real nice. That way it's not just slapped in here as well. So take a minute, turn to that, and see how it goes. So wiring is all done through this car, and from the back seat, got the panel on. From right here, nothing's gonna go through this back wall. That's actually our gas tank. The nice thing, while we need access to these top bolts for the rear strut, there's also a factory hole right here. Has a light little outline to pop through and run your harness, your ignition wire, and your controller wire through here. So don't bother with having to try and get anything through this side. It's not gonna happen. Again, you will need the bottom and the back seat out in full just to get the wiring through and have access to the top of our rear struts. So I'm gonna dial all this in once I get the suspension on and the airlines ran. There are 2 grommets, one right here on this, like, I guess, bottom, and one on the top over here. That's what I'm gonna use to run, I would say maybe the rear driver, rear passenger through this one, through 2 holes through that grommet. That way it doesn't touch any of the metal. If for any chance it moves, it doesn't get scraped, scratched, or damaged. I'm gonna have them both coil around this way, up, and through a small outlet right here. And then through the other grommet under this, I'll do the passenger front through this one, and they'll just snake right through here. When this is mounted on the ground, it'll be easy to get to the all the ports on our manifold. Again, small detail, tiny Allen key. I did just flip this. This is gonna be the orientation of this right here. Not finished, but just did a little bracket to be able to hold it down for the time being. So this will be all wrapped in carpet. This is mounted, all this is secured, but just kind of the small things. That way when you open the trunk, take the panel off and look, you don't see airlift switched around. So stuff to keep in mind or toy with if you want. But like I said, the wiring that goes through that little outlet, you have access to the power, ground for a compressor, and connection for the harness to the manifold. What I did too is with the compressor, the power and ground, I already had 2 connectors on here. I don't care to use those. I like being able to have kind of like a quick disconnect if needed for any reason. So I went and did male and female connectors on these, and then since you have to add them onto this anyways from the harness, I did the same thing. So connect ground, connect power. So, you know, in case any of this has to come out for whatever reason, we gotta take this back out to mount a second compressor. We're not having to try and cut and reconnect and all that stuff. Just the small things that make it convenient going forward. So that rear's dialed in. the front panels back on, carpets all, you know, put back together. Controller has access. And then now I'm gonna start removing the stock suspension from the front and throw on the Airlift Performance. Do keep note that if you order through, you know, the Airlift, the Airlift kit for this car, if you're running 3/8 airlines like we are here, unfortunately, even with the braided steel airlines, you're gonna need a fitting that's gonna go to the end of the hose, and it will have the connection for the airline 3/8 may not be included. So please, if you're, you know, car up in the air and stuff like that, you got this far and didn't check for those fittings, you're gonna be stuck and stranded until you either have someone local that has those fittings or place the order, wait the, you know, week or however long it takes to get those in. So that is the case that we got going on right now. Didn't have those extra fittings ordered. They weren't included. They do provide ones for 1/4 inch. Obviously, we're going to be running 3/8, so that's not going to work out for us. So what I did, and if you're in the same bind, you can use a fitting like this, at least an elbow fitting that will thread directly into the bag itself. And well, now we have a 3/8 airline connection. So this is still going to go in as planned. Instead of having like the braided line coiling down, it's just going to be airline. There's no loss of this. Just, you know, with whatever we got going on here, if you aftermarket wheels, you're riding crazy low, keep in mind that we want wiring, airlines, whatever it might be, tucked, secured, zip tied. I mean, with the kit, they give you a mess of them, so use that. The last thing you want is riding low, airing out, aggressive fitment, you know, that you don't run through those airlines and end up on the ground stuck. So if you run into that problem, there is a solution, temporary fix or desire to keep it this way. It's personal preference. So removing this front suspension, I've already broke it loose. I have a 15, and that's not gonna be for this bottom. Sorry, the 15 is gonna be for these top here. So 15, we'll break these 3 loose. And then this guy, not a 15, we have a 19. 19 is gonna fit right onto this. Already broke it loose. Once this is removed, this single bolt right here, you'll pop that straight through. 1, 2, 3. This whole strut, you just gotta kind of finesse through the suspension. Once that's out, vice versa. 1, 2, 3 bolts, one at the bottom. Keep this. They're not side specific like driver passenger. They're the exact same for these struts, but you probably want your fitting closer to this backside again, so it's away from the wheel. Luckily, this does swivel, so I can kind of turn it without removing it from the strut. So if it's facing straight towards this wall, I can just swivel it this way, run my airline back, down and through. So I'm gonna tear into this here in a moment. And then again, now that I have this up in the air, looking down, it's gonna be the exact same for this over here, where you can see right there in the bottom left, it's the single bolt. I'll also verify if it is also 19, should be. And then again, you gotta get access to 1, 2, 3. So again, did this in the Saucier. Some of this stuff already has a bit of play in it, but I would say use obviously a shorter socket to be able to get this back one. 1, 2, 3. Same steps, drops out, and then the rear strut in. So I think once I get these swapped, I'm just gonna jump right into the rear, do the same thing, and then we'll take a look at how this driver's side is gonna be set up. I'll get this car on this driver's side on the ground. Once that's done, passenger side, we'll take an all-around look of what this car looks like. Obviously sitting on the floor as I'm still kind of setting up the trunk setup. So that circular 1/2-inch board is what's gonna have everything mounted to the bottom. We're gonna do a 4-piece panel. So this second one right here, small portion. So you have a Celsior LS 400, you know what this looks like for the whole outline of your trunk. Tank is going to sit back there on that smaller piece. It's going to be butted up against the bigger panel. That way, if we need access to any of this stuff, we just take the big panel out and have access down here. Then I will have to shape the left and right, so kind of a goofy cutout, but I'll figure that out. So we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4. So at the end of all the suspension, we'll jump back into the trunk setup. So fronts are on. Taking a look back at this new top setup, damper knob as well, locked in, stocks removed, new struts on. So again, pretty straightforward, just 3 at the top, 1 at the bottom. Something you are gonna fight if you aren't aware of this already. With the stock suspension, trying to wiggle it out, you're gonna be hitting the back right here. So something that I did and I suggest is the little cotter pin right here and the castle nut. Remove those. Give yourself just a little bit of slack on this so it doesn't just completely pop off on you. But you will want to go ahead and either give like a light tap, PB blast this, light tap, and loosen right here in the ball joint, or you can get the tool for it too and press it out. It's pretty convenient if you can. Once that's done, this will drop down, support this and this whole assembly. That way you're not putting any tension on any of the lines through here. And then, I mean, original strut out, air suspension in, or coil over, and then, you know, everything vice versa. Pop this back together, it's easy, pushes in, bolts back up, make sure you put that little pin back through, and you're set. So again, as mentioned, if you're missing the fittings and you have a 3/8 airline set up for this, or almost probably any other vehicle with airlift, to do that swivel elbow fitting on the back, pointed the fitting towards the back right here so the airline could go direct into this port, snake down. We're gonna run it underneath the bottom of this car. So for this too, just so you know, sizes I used was a 19, a 15, and a 17 to get the job done. So front locked in, run the airlines, wheels back on, take care of the rear, and we'll see what that looks like. Front's done, rear's done. Taking a quick look back into this. So one last look generally is what I would suggest using. I got it set over here. Like I said, something like this. If you're having trouble, even with PB blast and hammer and all that stuff, is get a pulley to where generally what's gonna happen is underneath the boot, that we don't mess the boot up. These are gonna lock in right here, and you have this with a nut on the bottom, either for a ratchet or crescent or whatever to tighten this. It's gonna go ahead and pull this bar upwards, again, to release this from this assembly. But obviously with this brought down a little bit, that way it doesn't just pop. This little cotter pin removed as well. Once that separates, gives you access to pull this forward. Again, will let you bring the stock suspension out, and much easier to throw any aftermarket suspension in. So again, this front is finished, and then for the rear we got over here the 3 bolts at the top. Those were 15. I would suggest well, this is the 17, but in a 15, a longer socket than shorter. And then for the bottom down here, you're gonna have this nut that's going through the bottom of the strut and the bolt on this front inside. You're gonna run into the problem where a wrench doesn't matter, for my sake at least. Wrench either through this way out or anything down here below is not going to give you enough force to be able to just get this loose, at least for this car at least. So what I did, the sway bar right here through the back, I went ahead and removed that, which allowed me to, people have more access through here. So did it on this side, and Did on this side as well. So I was able to drop this bar down, and then as you can see, with this not in the way, you don't run into this issue. So I'd say remove the nut off this sway bar link first. Gives you access to this. And then after you drop those 3 from the top, that one from the bottom, take out the old, put in the new. You have a lot of room through this pocket right here. So once this whole strut drops downwards, you kick the strut out like this to where the top is towards you, the bottom down there, and then out without messing anything up. It's actually way easier and quicker than the front. So this driver's side's done. I'm not gonna mess with any of this yet because obviously I'll just kick it back my way over there. But once I'm done, I'll bring this back up, toss this back in, lock it down. The sizes I used, again, 3/4 inch. For this guy, you're gonna want a 3/4 inch to hold the backside as well. Otherwise, if you loosen that, you might just have that whole bolt free spinning, no progress made. So 3/4, maybe a shorty 3/4, and then I believe for that sway bar link down here, the nut for that one, that's a 17. So 17, 2 3/4 inch, and then another 15 long socket for the top, which would be on the inside of the car, back behind the seats. So I'll get this side dialed in. That'd be the front, the rear, all taken care of. Then I'll go ahead and run my airlines. You can run it through the inside of the car. I'm running it through the outside, so there's a lot more easier access. Everything's gonna be tucked up nice and neat so nothing gets damaged or, you know, driving low. And then once I get that all hooked up, we'll get the car on the ground, kind of get an idea of what it looks like aired out on these bad boys. And then from there, I guess just the final touches of getting the trunk set up, the panels tossed in. Again, I'll have to use either some extra that I got or go grab like another slab of 1/2 inch to build the last 2 panels, and then go from there. So let's see what this looks like. Here we are on the ground. Obviously, tank, still some of the panels from the trunk setup are out. So this is what the car looks like, technically aired out, laying pretty damn low. So that's great news. Now just get the trunk setup dialed in, and that about wraps it up on this car. Got the back seats, everything's all put back together, wipe stuff down from pulling it all out, vacuumed, all that good stuff. Again, panels, everything clipped back in, all those bolts locked down for the seats, all our wiring's all set up, and that's it for this. I will show one more video with all these panels put back in. This I'm finishing up wrapping, which is going to be that like far back end piece towards the wall for the tank. I guess like a side thing too, at least for the time being, just for the way this is set up. Water trap I did mount direct to the tank, so there's still room and accessibility to relieve any of the like moisture that's going to be caught inside this before it feeds to the manifold itself. And then I threw a connector on this top side that's going to be an airline from the compressor to the tank. So we have all this stuff down here. This is still going to get wrapped with, you know, some felts in case you're curious of what is used to get like a, you know, close color match to OEM interior. That's what was used for this. But once this is wrapped on this guy, this will be set. So as mentioned, compressor, braided line. I have a fitting at the very end, and you can see it's connected to the 1/4 inch right here. I'm gonna feed this up through the panels and then to the top of that tank, so it'll be quite nice. That way too, on the right side of the tank, we do the symmetrical setup. We can feed that either off to this right side or chase it with that 1/4 inch back around so it's discreet and have a dual compressor setup. But pretty straightforward with all this too. Like I said, I use like a little slit underneath where you can't see it to feed down to the little grommet at the bottom of this trunk, to feed our lines through. Another good thing, practice, as you run these through, I usually number these so I don't toss like one of the wrong lines onto one of the ports. So, you know, if I start with the first front driver, that's number 1, and I feed it through, I'll go ahead and mark that as, you know, number 1 on that. And I did the passenger front, label that as 2, so on. I did this corner 3, this corner last 4. That way, even though I can't see this, I know going from right here, this is number 1, 2, 3, 4, then tank, exhaust. So all that stuff too is in, hopefully if it was provided, the airlift performance like install guide, so something to reference if needed. But that should be it. We'll get these last 2 panels, or that one at least, just trimmed up a little more. The main one's done. I did go and shape these. So with the big one right here in the center and the top, at least it's gonna have some support since we don't have like the OEM factory cover, but it'll keep it from, you know, sagging down all crazy. So that'll be kind of nice to have. And then everything tucked underneath. So let me get these finished up, those last 2 wrapped, and then we'll see what this trunk setup looks like all together. And then that should be it. We'll just get the numbers dialed in for the recommended PSI in the front, recommended PSI in the back. We'll have an all up setting and then an all down setting. So tearing into this right now. We are finished up here with the LS 400 air suspension install and trunk setup. 4-panel piece, 1, 2, 3, 4. Shape to give some support, and then obviously pull these 2 sides on the bottom to have access to our manifold and our single compressor for the time being down below. Again, mounted the water trap direct 2. We have our feed for the compressor on the right side, plugged the other 2, and then at the bottom we have our Schrader valve connection that could swivel in case we want to hide that. But what's nice to have is if for any reason, if we don't get power to car or we need to emergency fill this tank up, we have access to it right there to fill that tank, get it pressurized, and get the car off the ground in case anything happens. So something to keep in mind. It doesn't have to be mounted to the bottom. It could be in line with anything as well too. Pretty much that's going to feed to the tank. So that should be it for now. This car is all finished and good to go. So I'm gonna track through on some videos, try and do some follow-ups to answer some questions, some general questions with the air suspension install on the cars, and anything else that may have been asked in some of the earlier videos with either the R8, the Supra, and then we'll see what's coming up next for another install, whether it be coilovers or hopefully more air suspension.